Okay, and so we are live now on YouTube and Twitter live. And greetings to everyone, and of course, greetings to our Twitter space, amazing warriors, aim art community, Ubuntu power warriors who have been hanging out with us since two, frankly, over an hour now, as always, really building community and building power. We are here with the one and only Dr. Sunny Nakai, powerful empress, doing the work of anti-racism, really bringing down the delusional systems of white supremacism by uprooting the white supremacist culture or dominant culture just really across the country. Also, our main in Nigeria, we call them Oga or Madam. That is the boss of Equity Matters Fellowship of ACGME, and we also have the powerful Sister Lana James also with us. And we have been breaking down our topic, which is how effective is an inside-outside strategy for institutional change for those of us who are doing work of justice and equity and anti-racism and anti-oppression in our various spaces in academia, outside of it, in medicine, healthcare, and public health, in the law, as grassroots folks. Frankly, in the Department of Transportation, I don't know what in the Ministry of Basket Weaving, whatever your situation is, but you're doing that change work. What does an inside-outside strategy look like for you? How do we use it? What does it mean? What does it look like? How do you use it? Is it infallible? Does it have limitations? Are there questions to be asked about it? And so we are unpacking all of that on today. And so we've covered quite a bit. Actually, these two brilliant sisters have really led us down a fantastic road. We've identified what the role of the insider are and the role of the outsider, the need for genuine connection between the two. We've talked about the challenges of being an insider and the seduction that can happen where you are in the party and drinking the Kool-Aid versus being in the party and deciding not to drink the Kool-Aid necessarily, but really being a person that can then channel or leverage the resources to support that of the outsiders, which should inform the ways that you move as an insider. Sister Lana reminded us that these spaces are inherently without life, that they are dead, these rooted colonial, frankly, settler colonial spaces, and that we should be about the business of building something different, but we should be careful because staying in there too long or being too entrenched starts to contaminate even us. And we talked about the importance of valuing ourselves and defining our value for ourselves outside of the titles and the trinkets, shall we say, of these spaces, and that when we do achieve these titles and other sort of trinkets, that truly it's in service of safe passage for those who are coming up behind us, and to leverage that to open the doors for those that are coming up behind us. But that truly we should not lose sight of the goal, which is to build anew, recognizing the inherent corruption, frankly, of the spaces in which we found ourselves. So many things that we outlined. And again, in transparency, we are just scratching the surface. This is a very rich and robust conversation, and it will be going on for a long time. And Sister Lana really brought up so much in this last comment, and reminded us about the need to really have those anchors and protections in place to prevent us from truly becoming corrupted by these corrupt spaces. And I want us to kind of sit with that and revisit that in a little while, as we go into the when we have the audience conversations, and just really have the community to think through what are the, if you are in academia or if you are in these predominantly white spaces and traditionally white spaces and intentionally white spaces, what are the anchors that you're using? What protective gear do you wear to ensure that you are maintaining your soul, shall we say? Because my belief is that when it happens, it is insidious. When it happens, you don't even know it's happening if you don't have people around you to tell you that something is changing. So what practices do you have in place to ensure that you are maintaining, your soul, and what does that look like? And I would really love, as you all start coming up, to share that, even as you offer, you make your other contributions. I also would like us to think about how do we define what is inside and how do we define what is outside. Dr. Nakai talked about, made a comment around her role as Dean of Student Affairs, and working with the students. And it was very interesting. I found that in the commentary, it appeared that she was defining inside as sort of, I guess, institutional leadership, and the students as the outsiders, even though both are parts of the same institution. So I think it's really interesting for us to think through how we define the inside and the outside, and then how that then impacts the strategy, the change, the goal setting, the organizing, etc. I want us to just kind of sit with that. But what I do want us to, our last kind of go around, I would love for us to really start to unpack and engage some of these things we have exposed, is around the white lash that we are experiencing in the work that we're doing, and how do we situate an inside outside strategy within that context. And so what am I referring to, as I realize that I just started a new room and need to repopulate the jumbotron, which I will when you all are offering your brilliance, is, but you both are clear, and hopefully y'all in the audience, you all have also sort of seen those links that I tweeted out earlier. I'm about to put them back on, and they're just examples, of predominantly white, seemingly straight, able-bodied men in medicine and healthcare who condemn, right, and are uncomfortable and threatened by what they're calling woke medicine and woke medical education. That, as we talk about anti-racism, anti-oppression, as we talk about social determinants of health, equity, justice, etc., these are, according to them, is essentially critical race theory, right, quote unquote, and a problem. And there are now all these articles coming out. Woke medicine is dangerous. Woke medicine is bad for patient care. It's bad for education. Woke medicine, it's given very critical race theory, like the way the right is handling critical race theory is given very much, hating, essentially. And so all these articles, so there's this white lash that has occurred. And that is why I started this conversation with the quote from Audre Lorde. Okay. And I just really have been moved by this quote, for me. And I'm going to repeat the quote again, because oftentimes when we talk again about being the insider and the challenges of the insider, and why we have some of us as insiders that struggle with optimizing the potential of the inside outside strategy to actually create real change, is that fear of what is happening. And before I say the quote, I was just instantly reminded. I was at dinner with two mentors of mine who are white men, and one of them research mentors, and I remember one of them talking about who identifies as a liberal, but being very worried and concerned. In fact, there's another white man who has made it his mission to just keep sending me on email all these articles that are coming out that show the upset of these people at being woke. And so I remember one of my research mentors saying, look, now that all this, they're making people learn this and learn that, you see what they're doing, you see what they're saying. And I had to look at him in the face and say, and so what? And so what? Who does change work and not expect that there will be a pushback? Who is this person? Where? Who does that? Where in the world has power just been like, oh, I'm so sorry, have I been mean? Here. Where has that happened? Why are you telling me this? To be shocked? Like, yes, I was born at night, but you think I was born last night? Of course there's pushback. Who wants to be told that, no, you have to not be what you've always been and thought you were entitled to all your life? Like, I don't understand. This is not the conversation. The conversation is, okay, given that pushback, how do we protect people, keep people safe, and keep moving forward? I don't want to hear anything that insinuates that we should kind of slow down, calm down, stop doing, because what you might be scared, I'm not. And why am I not scared is because of this quote. And even if I was scared, because I was, I talk about courage a lot. And courage is not the absence of fear, it's doing what you got to do despite the fear. And even A, not being scared, but B, even when I'm scared, still pushing forward. And that's because, again, of what my sister Audre Lorde said, which is when I dare to be powerful. And sometimes I replace dare with choose. When I choose to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. My fear is, whether it's present or not, is just not important, because I'm choosing to be powerful and to use my strength in service of the vision of our collective liberation. We got to keep moving forward. We got to re-strategize. We got to organize. Keep moving forward. Any conversation that's slow down, calm down, it doesn't matter. If you're scared, say so. We'll take care of you, but we're not stopping. We got to keep it moving. And so I say all that, as I think through the white lash. And I know that it has caused a lot of people fear, because that's what it's intended to do, right? And I am just wondering, how do we situate, what does an inside outside strategy to address or not address this white lash? How is it situated? What does it look like? Is it an effective approach in addressing this or not? Do we need another approach? Should we not address it? How do we have the conversation around the white lash that's inevitable and not new, as everything is? Do we have a conversation around fitting an inside outside strategy in regards to this white lash, or maybe not? And so, Dr. Nakae, I wonder if you can start. And for you all, I'm going to go ahead and repost those links on the Jumbotron.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Opara. So we were kind of talking a little bit earlier about whether it's even possible to effectively respond to that. So I want to say, I think we are meeting more and more resistance to equity work because power meets power. So as we become more powerful, the folks who are at the center of power of these institutions double down. They see ground being taken away. And so, as my husband says, it just don't make no never mind. We're just going to go ahead and do what we're going to do anyway, and just move forward. And I also think that a lot of these editorials and all this bullshit that's being spewed, it's just a distraction, right? It's just meant to get up. It's signaling to other white people, right? These editorials are not for us. Let me just be clear real quick. That shit is not for us. It's for other white people, right? To tell them, wait a minute, here's how this stuff that these folks are doing threatens you. That's how this all works. Because we already understand oppression. We already know the losses of it. We are going to do this work regardless. But as we begin to recruit people who have enjoyed the silence of neutrality, now they're saying, hey, wait, we can't have you recruiting all the folks who've been in the middle, right? That silent majority that Dr. King talked about. Those editorials are for those people. And to your point, Dr. Opara, the woke white people are calling you saying, oh my God, what is going on? Right. Are you afraid of it? You're like, I call this a Tuesday. No, this is the same old stuff. It's been like this for a very, very long time, right? So we come to expect that resistance. I want to say a couple things about an anchor, because I've been really thinking about what Sister Lana said around what anchors us. And for me, it is that, a principle that I learned when I did my PhD at Loyola was that my education is for the world. It is not for me. It is for the world. And I'm a vessel in that. And so values undergird some of the things that we do. And there are these tipping points or moments where we decide, is this centered in my values? So I've made guidelines for myself. And one of them is that I never charge for advising. I don't. For any pre-med student, folks who need my services the most, I don't charge. If you're in a position to pay, then I'm not the person that's working for you. You can go and pay another advisor because you don't need me to help you get in anyway. So I've been offered lucrative, like, hey, my kid wants to get in. And, people kept my number from like high school, fairs and will call me and I just refer them. Like, that's not part of what I do. That's not my true north. The second thing is having watched people, as Lana was referring to, who lost their true north, who became assimilated into the institution and who allowed themselves to become colonized. The financial piece of that was very real pressure that actually caused people to let things go, right? And so I watched many amazing minority folks slowly get swallowed up into that. And part of it was these external demands on their livelihood. And so I made a commitment to myself that I would never have my livelihood come from the institution. My integrity is not for sale. And my husband and I have talked about this. I will walk away in 2 seconds if I feel that there's something is threatening my integrity. And I have to have that as my basis to understand that, as you said, Lana, I work for this place, but I am not this place. This place does not make me. It does not own me. It does not define me. Right. And as I am drawing a paycheck in any 1 second, I will say, nope, I no longer agree, to these terms. And so being really clear about that from the beginning has helped me, I think, be able to keep my true north. So that's defining your values, right? And then creating some of those rules. Here's the things that I will do, and here's the things that I will not do in accordance with my values. Maybe can help us anchor a little bit more in the storm. And I'm not saying that I'm immune to the institutional toxicity, because it is a huge distraction and has pulled me down many times. And thank goodness for my village, folks like Dr. Mason and my colleagues at CUSM who've threw me the life raft and said, come on out of there for a second. You need to detox for a while and figure out how to move forward doing something different.
I love that. I love the detoxification. We all need regular periods of detoxification. I'm currently detoxing right now. And that is so important. Like Sister Lana said, how long are you going to be in there? Plan how long you're going to be in there. And that can look like, just sort of like, I'm going to work here for 5 years and then I'm going to do something else. Or it could look like, I don't know how long I'm going to be. It might be 10, 15, but I'm going to take a long periods of breaks, a frequent regular breaks, to ensure that I am maintaining my true north. I also love, again, the reminder about the distraction. As Auntie Toni Morrison told us, what is racism? A distraction. At the end of the day, racism, a distraction to keep us away from what our business. Basically, I like to just call it our business. And but I love that piece about the distraction. And thank you again for that reminder. And that each sexy thing that comes up, oh, this person said this, like Auntie Toni Morrison said, somebody says you have no culture, you run around trying to prove you got culture. Somebody says you can't do math, you run around trying to prove they already know. You are not telling them anything. They knew you're great. You're not threatened by something that isn't threatening, right? You're not threatened by, I don't know, if something is truly inferior to you, you're not threatened by it. It's inferior to you. You must internalize my superiority for you to be out here doing the most for centuries. For what? So it is clear that they know we know math and created math. They know we know science and created science. They know we created math. They know this. So what are you proving? You're not proving nothing they don't know, because it's not about that. It's about cementing this, again, delusion, this false idea, but that has allowed them through acts of violence, as Lana said, and trickery and savagery, to rape, destroy, pillage, extract, at great cost and harm and loss to majority of the world, in order to maintain a hierarchy of power. And it is represented and replicated in these systems that we find ourselves in: academia, healthcare, public health, and like I said, and the whole list we went through. So I appreciate that. Sister Lana, what are your thoughts? And and then we will go to the audience. So audience, yeah, I see you. Go ahead and request to speak. And if you're out there in YouTube land, you are also welcome to post your comments. And Sister Lana, what are your thoughts in terms of this white lash and the inside outside piece going on there?
I think white lash has always been what they've been trying to do, right? The lash has always been about white people trying to beat the shit out of us to get something done or the other, unfortunately. I think, my mind's been thinking a lot about transplant medicine and the ways in which Black people are constantly made the site of extraction for organs, but not the recipients of them. In Canada, we are the youngest population. It vacillates between us and First Nations and Métis and Inuit folks. And when you look at that math for an aging white settler colony, it reads like a science fiction novel. The math is just that they're going to want and want. And so when I think about inside outside in relationship to really important areas of medicine and what it means to survive as a people, I think specifically about how does that white lash show up there, right? It shows up when in the US you have these physicians who have been practicing race medicine their entire career perjure themselves in public and say, I've never been concerned about my patient's race. It's like, boo, you've been murdering Black people for some time now. And I bet you if you pull your medical charts, we'll find it there. Let's see your referral rate to the transplant list. Let's see what that looks like. And so the white lash has always been there in medicine. That's race correction. That's denial of access to technologies. And now we see it again with artificial intelligence and machine learning and genomics, in that the white lash is this constant statement that if we don't go along, if we don't open our bodies up to become the Rosetta Stone, that somehow we're not doing what needs to be done for everyone. So the white lash shows up in all kinds of ways. It shows up in these kind of, if you will, violent stories about what we're supposed to give up. And it shows up when we refuse it. It shows up when we're said to have vaccine hesitancy, when what we really have is a real concern about the failure of pharmaceuticals to be regulated in any appropriate way. So there's all of these ways in which white lash shows up to discipline us into the categories of behavior that white people, or those that are in power, because they're not all white, and so I think it's really important for me to continue to think about, and maybe others, how that regulates our behavior and what are the things we get to pay attention to, right? What do we get to advocate for? And I know that for myself, it's been a struggle because in Canada, there's this constant denial of the anti-Black racism that they're performing, right? I had the unfortunate experience of a Black person who knows very little about the resistance work in the Americas trying to just lump Black people under racism. I'm like, what, did you miss 40 years of resistance work? And again, that's the difference of working within and with, right? Being in an institution and being within an institution. So I think the white lash is real. It's always been real. That is the nature of colonization. And I think that I really appreciate what Dr. Nakae has pointed out, having colleagues who can say, girl, it's time for you to come out. I know I have that in my life. I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for it. And I also want to say that we have to know how long can you do it? And also what lifestyle do you need to live? Right? I made a decision some years ago. People thought I was crazy. Because, everybody like, you got to get the house and you got to do whatever. And I was like, I'm not comfortable with a whole bunch of stuff. And I understand international banking to a level that probably I wish I didn't. And I let go of a lot of stuff, right? Because as much as we think that by owning, we call shots and not owning, it's all about timing, right? It's about what are you leveraging it for? So yeah, many of us have demands that are external, if you're first gen or whatever. But part of being first gen is about coming to a place and assuming that you have a right to acquire a lifestyle that you couldn't somewhere else. And that's been marketed to us as so natural, and it's not true. If the people who are of the place are getting their ass kicked, and you come from the place where you wasn't getting your ass kicked, it's unnatural to think that you should get something there. And that your family should expect that to happen. Because it means you're getting over on somebody. And I think that whole immigrant thing, we got to kick that shit. Because first gen means that you come here as first line to join a struggle, and you may get something and you may not. But this idea that you're supposed to get shit is wrong, because it immediately puts us in opposition to each other. It means that that's how we have POCs thinking they're entitled to things that multi-generational Black people on the North American continent and First Nations and Native Americans have yet to get. And we don't stop. I'm watching it. I have to call out Black people. I got to call out my recent, quote, migrants into the Americas and be like, what makes you think you deserve a car, medical education, and folks they ain't even got no water in the reserve, and Black folks have been here for 4 or 5 generations, still can't even get a decent place to live? It is messed up. So a lot of this is about our expectations that don't match the time or place. So we create these false needs, and therefore we create false commitments. And I will not ever accept when people tell me I got obligation. Everybody does. Everybody has an obligation. We all are trying to make a living. We're all trying to get a roof over our heads, but we also come with a sense of entitlement. That's not what the Americas are here for. It is not. It's not what we see it with Ukrainians. It's appalling. They're just dropping off train loans of white settlers in a place where they have failed to meet their obligations to people who have actually given something to building a just and fair place. And so I think it's also about, what lifestyle do you think you're entitled to? What do you think is a decent and fair living? And what are you willing to give up so that it's more even? Because middle classness doesn't come without a whole lot of violence. And when I had to sit down, my father was always a very honest man. We had some very intense and deep discussions about who invests and who does, and how that's understood and how that value. And so I think that when we come into these spaces and we don't expect, then we kind of ask around to the people that we meet there and we say, so how are you making it with you and yours? And there's a different kind of movement work that's done. And I think that's the thing about inside, outside. We talk about these outside spaces, but these are movements for humanity. And so the question is, how do you not just stay anchored, but how are you moving a movement? And that's very difficult, because many people aren't committed to a movement. They're committed to some ideas and visions, but not a movement. And that's a broader and deeper commitment, and requires a deeper sacrifice. And I agree, many may not be in a position they feel because of where they are in their own development and thinking and what they've had and haven't had over a course of life. So I'm bringing this up because of how class comes into this discussion and how income comes into this discussion, and how some of us have convinced ourselves of things that aren't completely true. And I know that when I, had to sit down and think about it and debate this and argue this with my father when he was alive, it was really eye-opening for me to think about it. And as I got through my own stages and was like, yeah, the car, the house, vacation, da-da-da, some of us get it, some of us don't. But the question is, like, what does it all mean, and how am I burning up the environment? How am I? It's the delicate balance. So the inside is not just about what we do 9 to 5 or 8 to 10 or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Or for some of us, it seems like it never ends. But it's about how we live. What are your bills? What is your lifestyle? And how much debt should you have? I remember my father saying to me, never live a life where you can't tell somebody to kiss your Black ass. And I think that is the number one thing that should define how deep you get in. Just going to leave it there.
I appreciate that, babe. We went there. We went there. We went there. And Dr. Nakae, I noted that. That was one of the things I noted. And I said, I'll bring it back. But I'm glad, Lana, you went in there. We talked about why and how, what compromises insiders, right? What compromises the insider and prevents insiders from, being that effective voice, that powerful voice that I know they want to be. Those of us on the inside that but we have to name, well, what are the leash, should I say, the leashes to the leash, or the, the shackles to that prevent that from happening necessarily. And they're numbered. There's a whole list. But one of the things, I'm so glad we went there, because we don't talk enough about it, but is that financial piece, right? Is that financial piece. And you said, Dr. Nakae, I put myself in a position where I never have to be dependent on the institution for my livelihood. And we're going to go into the audience, but I do want you to explain, what does that mean? So is it that you have a side gig? Is it that you went and tripped and fell in Walmart and got a nice settlement? Is it that you played the lottery? But the point is, like, because folks might be listening and saying, well, how do I get there? I don't speak up, I don't participate, I don't agitate, because I need this paycheck. And that's real. We got, have to make space for that. But both, you and Sister Lana are bringing up a very important point. And absolutely, in everything that we do, it is intersectional. This work is always inherently intersectional. We are a bunch of privileged, smart, comfortable ladies, around this round table. And many of us in this room are, and many of us may not be. And everyone has a story. And if it's not us, we have family members who are struggling. It's a thing. And so question is, how do we be free when we're economically or financially shackled? And when free to do the freedom work we want to do, if we're economically, and so it becomes really important. And I want to, again, as I challenged everyone to think through, what is your anchor? What are your guardrails to ensure that you are not corrupted by, you are not staying contaminated, influenced negatively by these toxic spaces, and then become an agent of these spaces, knowingly, unknowingly, subconsciously, consciously, or unconsciously. And thinking through the anchor of, wait, what are the ways in which I'm shackled and beholden to this institution that prevents me from being able to live in my truth? And is one of those shackles financial or economic? And where does class and other and your immigration visa, right? Let's name them, right? All begin to play a role here, Dr. Nakae. And then after you speak, I want to shout out some of the amazing comments that have been coming up on Twitter, and end on with one of our wonderful folks who Dr. Kim, I somehow you dropped off. I'm inviting you back up to speak, and you also gave a wonderful comment as well. So Dr. Nakae, you go ahead, and then I'll read off these comments as we open up to our village.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to follow up on this, because I think that it's a both and we all cannot run faster than we have strength, and there are limitations. All of us have limitations and responsibilities, and we don't exist in a space outside of that. And for me, I think some of the guardrails are, just in terms of my strategy, is trying to think about developing multiple income streams, living below means, right? And as Lana said, like, the things that we get accustomed to, there's the Buddhist saying that if you own a horse, the horse owns you, right? So by what things do I possess that own me and that obligate me in specific ways? I think honesty and alignment are two things that we can all really strive for. And we can't have perfect alignment all the time in the things that we're doing, because, we go to the grocery store and we buy something and we recognize that we bought blueberries for $1.99 a pint, and a person was oppressed in getting those blueberries, to your table, right? So I think we can be honest about how we intersect with structures that are oppressive. I learned about, like, practices of Walmart, for example, and the inequities and some of the ways that it hurts small business, and that many of the employees don't have healthcare and all that. And when I was in graduate school and I was flat broke and trying to provide for my kids while I was working and everything, I had to vote with my dollars in terms of, like, my own survival, right? And I got to a place where I can choose more economically which businesses I want to support, right? I go to a local bookstore instead of Amazon, but I didn't always do that, right? So I think it's just, can we have honest conversations with ourselves and say, this is what I aspire to do or be, and I recognize that I am participating in systems that are oppressive. It's impossible in a capitalist society not to. Or again, this entire thing is shackles for everyone, right? We're all bought and sold in specific ways within a capitalist system. And so can we have those honest conversations with ourselves? And can we do it in a way that comes from a place of love? So explaining to my 6-year-olds when they would go with my ex-husband to their other side of the family and go to Walmart. And like, how do we teach children that this is something that we choose not to do for reasons about our family values, but don't we don't spend energy actively condemning other people because we don't know their position or their life or where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
So how can we stand in our values without being in that building where we're looking down on other people?
Absolutely.
Because then we're centering ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
Then we're using our values to make ourselves look better, which is not what those values are for. Those values are actually to keep us anchored and to keep us with the people and connected to communities that fuel the work in the first place. So I think it's both and it's complex, and just continuing to strive for that alignment, that self-reflection, and that self-honesty about the capitalist systems that we participate in on a daily basis is sometimes the best that we can do. And I don't want people to feel bad, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't think that abundance is bad. I think abundance is amazing, especially when you share it, right? And it can give opportunities to divert resources to help with change and to fuel the change and the work. And so it doesn't mean that we all have to be penniless living on the street. As you said, Dr. Opara, like, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that we're doing.
Right.
You know, the laptop that I have is, you know, a resource that's allowing us to do work and to reach more people. So,
look, listen, abundance is amazing. Oh, I'm Nigerian, so we abundance is everything. Abundance is our inheritance. What? but your point is well taken. Absolutely. You know, it goes back to what you were saying, both you and Sister Lana, right? Around how do we leverage what we have? You know, how do we leverage the gifts and talents and blessings and assets or what have you to open up the doors for others, to create the tools for change, to not be dependent. I think it goes again. What I usually try to help my husband understand. I say money is a tool. Is a tool. You know, you don't have money for money's sake. It's a tool. What are you using it for? Right? What are you using it for? Is used to, you know, buy freedom for a lot of time. So you don't have to do certain things. So you are free to do the things you want to do. You know, it's a whole different mentality. And I think like this should probably be a whole a whole different round table, to be honest. We can really go deep and unpack. But I think that was a very I think that was one of the best things to say, what you offered, you know, the love of it all, right? The love of it all, that we have these values for us. These are our reasons why, but we don't impose on other people because everybody's on their journey. And that runs counter to the very same values we are trying to, you know, be out here oppressing people with. Like, so no, and I think I think that's a loving and appropriate approach. Let me shout out Dr. Peterson before we go to our audience here. Dr. Aderonke Peterson gave some wonderful, beautiful comments. Thank you so much, sis. I appreciate the comment of culture of death and colonialism. So powerful. One caveat is our babies are in these spaces as med students, residents, fellows, postdocs, and they're being touched by these harms. We need some of us in there for them. I was a medical student at Northwestern, drowning and just seeing a Black man, John Franklin, and Dr. Nakai is your girl, Dr. Peterson, in that space as I walked to the library, gave me some air. Look, you are not telling a lie. You are not telling a lie, Dr. Peterson. That is absolutely right. It matters. You know, our presence in these spaces matter. And I love what you said, Dr. Nakai. You know, we change the space we are by just our presence. They you know, alone. We don't want it to come at a cost of harm to us, and that's a part of the conversation. But we do need to acknowledge that our very presence, you know, matters, and it does. One of the reasons I'm still where I'm at in terms of my institution is exactly that reason, and I know it makes the world of difference to see me as a Black woman in all of this jelly and all of this, the ruckus that I cause, and the way that I show up in the world. It's important that somebody sees that this it's what is possible for them, and hopefully even much more they will accomplish than I. So thank you, Dr. Peterson, for that offering. We have Dr. Scott, Karen Scott, who shouted out and and reminded us that it was a disgruntled former School of Medicine dean whose student body wrote him an open letter of disapproval and disagreement that wrote one of the articles that I shared for in terms of that represented the white lash. Thank you, Dr. Scott, for that investigative reporting and letting us know. And she says, why are we keeping still giving him a platform? Is it because of his evidence-based medical ethics and sympathy? And she rolls her eyes, like, says it sarcastically. And that was a comment really geared for New York Post, who published his drivel. And so thank you, Dr. Scott, for keeping New York Post honest. Dr. Kim Rhodes, my wonderful sister and NIH sister, and I wanna lift up your comment before we give you the mic there, and let me go ahead and just mute you for a little bit there. But I see that you made a note here, and I just want to shout that out. Let's see. Da, da, da. Okay, you were just responding to Dr. Scott, but you did make a note that we don't have to participate in the strategy to keep people down, eyes of the prize. And so I think you made a tweet that you deleted, and that's fine. You're going to speak and you're going to say what you need to say, but I do want to recognize this thought of eyes on the prize and not getting distracted. That's what I'm sort of feeling from that, which is what Dr. Nakae and Dr. Lana, soon to be Dr. Lana, spoke about in understanding and recognizing the white lash really ultimately as distraction, and that we need to keep our eyes on the prize. Dr. Kim, you are welcome. Dr. Kim Rhodes is a fantastic, phenomenal sister, peer mentor, just a marvelous person. I'm so honored and blessed to have her in my life. And welcome to the Roundtable. What prize are you referring to when you say eyes on the prize, and what else is on your mind that you want to offer in response to this discussion?
Thank you so much for giving me the mic. I really appreciate this conversation. I feel like I am a student of and a practitioner of inside-outside strategy, so I like that it is being discussed. I think what I want to offer is, I think Eyes on the Prize is about change, and it's about, for me personally, that change is about health equity. And a nurse I used to work with gave me a little exercise that she would do with people. It was like an icebreaker, and the first sentence was, I am about, and then you fill in the blank, and then it says, I have always been about. And for me, that word is justice. So even though I have been inside the institution now going on my 30th year, including in some of the whitest institutions in the Department of Surgery as a high level administrator, clinic director, medical director of a busy medical surgical unit, and sort of all over this sort of, I guess, white supremacist institutions across the country. I'm here because inside outside is, I think, a strategy that needs to happen. And I feel like because of my training and background, I have a lot to offer and to the outside. And I also just want to make note that I think there's a sense that inside outside as a concept is coming from the academy out to the outside. And I just want to offer an alternative scenario, which is that inside outside strategy was introduced to me by Baba Arnold Perkins. And if you don't know who he is, please Google him. You will see his picture, know immediately why it's important. But in terms of his credentials, which he rarely ever shares, he was the director of the Department of Public Health in Alameda County in Oakland. He's still kind of a kingmaker for who directs that department. He was the founder of the Brotherhood of Elders Network. Google that. That's another powerful entity here in Oakland, and the convener of the California Black Freedom Fund, which brought together Black philanthropists to do an initiative effectively working in partnership. And finally, he's the chair of the Community Advisory Board at the Cancer Center where I work, and I feel like he is my muse and definitely an anchor for me as I try to keep my head on straight. I think one of the things that we're talking about in terms of the peril of the person who works inside is actually about leadership, which obviously I think we all kind of understand as an activity, but it's an activity about moving a change agenda, which is of course scary to the people who are benefiting from the status quo that, you know, maybe we're trying to change. And I think the temptations that have been talked about that can seduce people play and prey really on the difficulty that some of us might have differentiating role versus self. So, you know, the role is how others see you. So it's defined by other people. Self is the thing that you bring to every single role that you're in. And you're the only one who can know that self because you're the only one who's in every relationship. So no one else can really know yourself. They can only know you in a role, even if they know you in a million roles. And some of those roles obviously will be doctor, surgeon, daughter, sister, mother, brother, you know, whomever you are, you exist to certain people and they see you in a role. Once you figure out what that role is, I think it's much easier to manipulate as needed. So my anchors, which were asked for, like how I feel like I have survived for 30 years in some treacherous situations, is that when I started medical school, I remember having the thought, and I don't know why, but I've heard it already on this call, that I'm human first, and all the other roles, you know, after that are after that. So it's about not elevating the importance, for example, of being a doctor, and for surgeons, like really bad, like being a surgeon. Like people can really kind of exalt themselves, failing to recognize that it's a role. And I used to tell the medical students, you know, I don't conflate my role with myself as a surgeon, because if I did and I were to lose my hand in a car accident, I would not actually be able to be a surgeon anymore. So what would be left if all I could see is myself as a surgeon? I often tell the medical students I am in it, but not of it. And I think that was explained pretty well in the beginning of the talk, but I say it all the time. And then the other thing that I do is I stay outside the building as much as possible. And just for an example, I want to shout out that one of my outside partners is on the call. It's Dr. Noha Abalada. If you don't know who she is, please check her out. And Roots Community Health Center. So just as one example, one of the things that we are doing together is training young people of color from Deep East Oakland in helping them have a summer exploration as an Umoja Health summer intern. And you know, a lot of academic institutions do like, oh, the summer internship, right? And they bring you into a space that is completely toxic. And nobody talks to you about the fact that it's toxic. And so I was in one of those programs as a 14-year-old. My lab was not toxic. They really nurtured my curiosity about science. But what I couldn't figure out was, why were all the Black people saying hi to me? I was like, I don't know these people. And it was only until I became, you know, a resident and faculty that I started to understand they're saying hi because they're trying to shepherd and shield me from what they know exists on this campus. And so Dr. Noha and I and Marcus Foster Education Institute put together a summer internship where a big part of the focus is actually on non-traditional ways of delivering care. And so check out Umoja Health. Check out Roots Community Health Center, because it looks traditional on the outside, totally not traditional at all. Definitely for us, by us. And so we also train them, plant them in things, training and the conversations, that we understanding what you're entering into. Effectively, it's like a preparation so that people don't have to get distracted with like, wait, was that racist? I'm not sure. Or should I fight against that? What should I do? It's a lot of time expenditure. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of cortisol. It's a lot of diabetes, hypertension, and all that other good stuff. And then it ends up with people getting derailed. And I've been in that situation too, so can speak to that, but won't. So the other thing that we do together is, right now I'm out here with a volunteer core of community folks called Umoja Health, delivering COVID-19 vaccine shots in the parking lot at Roots, which extends Roots Clinic's ability to deliver service to their community on the weekend. So that's inside, outside at work. And then I just want to say, lastly, I'm doing this because when I left surgery, I let go of all of the rewards of the academy. I took a new position as an adjunct. I said, I don't really care. I just want to do the work, as I heard Dr. Okara say. And I positioned myself as an administrator, but I picked a role where I get paid and I get rewarded for holding the institution accountable. And just in case you're thinking it, no, I'm not the DEI person in my institution. So I take my role of holding institutions accountable very seriously. I know it makes some people angry, but too bad, because I'm now, this model of community engagement has now earned 3 huge grants on our campus, about $20 to $25 million a piece, one international, one national, and one statewide. And so I know for the next 5 years, they really can't touch me. And that allows me to switch over to the in-residence line so I can get tenure, which I really don't care about. But as has been said before, I know that that's going to help me leverage the resources of the institution and make sure they get to the communities. I'm going to continue to hear ways to get the resources out. So I keep finding loopholes in how we pay people, forcing them to change, and making the barrier, as I said in one of my tweets, between the academy and community more porous. And that came to me, that definition of making that barrier more porous was brought to me by our dear sister, freedom fighter, inside out advocate, Dr. Kamara Jones. So thank you for...
Okay, Dr. Kim Rhodes, you done eating? Are you done eating all the food and then not leaving anything for us? So now we have to like order in on DoorDash because you done eating it all. But thank you, Dr. Rhodes. There is so much in what you said. All I will say in this moment is there are 2 thoughts, observations I'll make. One is, what I really sincerely appreciate is the examples based on your experience. You just really brought that lived experience examples of inside outside as you have learned and you practice it, from the decisions you made in terms of your career, to your practices for anchoring and guard railing, which seems like, even though you didn't say it explicitly, but I did take away that you are very entrenched in your community, with your community partners, in a very intimate way. We definitely know and love Dr. Noha because you both were on. I know you both, but you did the kindness to the roundtable of introducing her and a few weeks ago, and she was one of our honored co-hosts and really blew up the spot with her brilliance. And so we're grateful that Dr. Noha, that you're here with us also again. And I've loved your commentary on Twitter, and Dr. Noha Abuelata has noted awesome discussion, fire, learning more about this, read the insight strategy and the imperative to maintain outside connections and center community. And she quotes you, Dr. Nakae, if we center ourselves, we've already lost our way. Like, yaks, okay? And Dr. Noha, you also say we can't program and service our way out of U.S. disparities. Systems change is required if we are ever to achieve equity. Looking forward to this space. Thank you for those comments. And so, Dr. Rhodes, absolutely, we're proud to have Dr. Noha back. And Dr. Noha, you are welcome to come on stage. In fact, I've sent you an invitation to speak, as well as to join us at any time. You are part of the community in terms of future roundtables. The second observation I wanted to know, actually, I already said that, which is your lived experiences and the anchoring in terms of the community work that you do. I did want to note that I have put on the Jumbotron links to Baba Arnold Perkins, and also links to Roots Clinic and Umoja Health. So that's on the Jumbotron for you all to access. And Lana James sent us a book, UNC Press, which I'm sure she'll tell us in a bit, by Cedric J. Robinson, The Terms of Order, Political Science, and the Myth of Leadership. So I'm sure that you will make the connections with that book, Lana, when we come around to you. Actually, let's go ahead and start with you, Lana. Why did you want that book to be shared, and any sort of reactions or response you have to Dr. Rhodes' dissertation as she laid out from a lived experience standpoint, all the many examples that she literally has translated practically everything we talked about into her own life?
Mm-hmm. I offered that book as a support to what she was saying, and also some of the pieces that Dr. Nakae had pointed out. It's also a book that in my studio, we don't use the word lab, is part of our reading list. And I think it's a valuable book because Cedric Robinson meditated on many of these questions very heavily. And for people that are not familiar with him, he's an African American who did amazing work and critical thought in the Black radical tradition, and has written several books. And you can find videos that he did. He's passed, of course. And there's a more recent book by Dr. Josh Myers that he released on Cedric's work. That particular book is about leadership and what leadership looks like, which is closer to what we've been talking about, and kind of brings out some of the key pieces on what does it mean to think about leadership, which is part of what this inside outside is typically getting at, right? Is, how do we move through and create change when we're trying to transform, if that is, some people are trying to reform, I'm trying to transform a system. And that leadership can be challenging because it's one of the ways, if we go back to the earlier part of our conversation, that we get seduced, right? And so when we're thinking about leadership, I would say that that's a good text to read because he points out how leadership runs on typically a premise that somehow the leader has something that others don't, right? And that it sets us up for a particular kind of hierarchy. And he thinks through it with us. So I would recommend that book because I think it points to what our guests have spoken to, but provides some deeper opportunities to go in chapter by chapter. And I would encourage folks to actually have it as a book club book. If they haven't read it, it's a must read. I don't know how you can be in the Black radical tradition and not have at least cracked the spine. So take a look. And I think it amplifies what our wonderful folks have put on the floor for us to think about.
Thank you, Lana. I appreciate that. Let's hear from the one and only. In Nigeria, we'll say that you know, get twin, get two. That means that this person is so unique. It is just her, and that is the one and only Dr. Pascal Guiton. Always bringing the fire wherever she's at. Just a powerful, passionate brand of power, frankly. If you pardon me using that multiple times, but let's hear from you, Sister Pascal, and then we'll have Dr. Nakae respond as we wrap up our time together. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Roundtable. I've missed you. I haven't heard your beautiful voice in a long time.
Yeah, thank you. It's so funny. I was on vacation and then I got COVID and then I started my new job. So I've been a bit all over the place.
But, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. But this conversation is really it's really awesome. I really related to this idea of let your value guide you while you are in this environment. But I also have to say that it is scary. It is scary to sort of stand up and say, enough, I am leaving. And so I don't want to, folks who are kind of young like me and they just started their career, it's really scary because you get into the system. And if you were not raised by, let's say, radical like me, right? My parents, they barely did anything about anything. So they were just doing their work and bringing food at home, but we never really were steeped into radical Blackness and all of that, right? And so I was going through the world pretty naive, and you get in the system, you do what you're supposed to do, and at some point you wake up and you realize that, apparently it's not enough for me to do what everybody does, right? And you have to do even more, and that awakening is very it's heart-wrenching. And it's also, I don't know, it's brutal, right? And then you choose, right? So it's this idea of, do I choose to assimilate, essentially, or do I choose to transform that environment so I can thrive? And I think that's the decision that many of us sort of at some point in our career sort of struggle with, right? I cannot save everyone. Some would say, I'm going to do my best and protect myself, or I'm going to basically speak out and see what happens. And so at time I feel a bit guilty, if you will, that I've started so late, right, where I could have made a difference early on. But yeah, but like, and then another full disclaimer: I'm married to a white man, right? So at time, I also feel like a traitor because one of my approach is, and he's from Serbia, so it doesn't have this American-ness, whiteness thing going. Because also Serbian are considered like I guess, the slave of Europe. So he has sort of this understanding of what it means to be, discriminated against just because of where you're from. But at the same time, he does understand that he's benefiting from all the white supremacy that is here. So I make sure that he never forgets that shit. No, but what I'm saying,
I was waiting for it, Dr. Pascal. I knew you would not disappoint.
No, yeah. Because what I'm saying is, it really, to reiterate what has been said, it is so easy to forget who you are and what you thought your career was going to be. So just as an example, I just quit my job in May after 5 years of trying to make an institution that is supposed to be for minoritized students to actually do that for the students. And just as an example, I was looking for all the students of color who were in the College of Science. I asked for a list, and they couldn't find it. They had no resource. Yet, it is a school that is supposed to help, or it's a school for minoritized students. And so this hypocrisy, at some point you're like, okay, I'm drawing this paycheck, but I feel like I'm contributing to the demise of my people, of the next generation. So how long am I going to stay in that system to fight it, right? So that's sort of one of the things that I'm struggling with. I mean, I quit after 5 years. I gave up tenure, and I'm starting all over again. And this time I'm starting at a place that is, Catholic, all white, rich kids, because it's closer to home and all the other external things. So, but my question really is, how do we, how do we continue to do this work without basically losing our own sanity? Because it was really difficult for me when I said I'm leaving, to know that I am leaving my student behind, right? And I'm abandoning them in a way. So how do we do that in such a way that we protect ourselves? Because if we not well ourselves, like, we cannot help anybody, right? So I don't know. I guess that's what my question is. And also, the second thing is, how do you sort of determine those values, right? Because one in my letter of resignation, what I said was, my values do no longer align to those of the department, and that is as true as it gets, right? But then, how do you, now that you're starting on your place, how do you make sure that these values are sort of on display from the get-go, so there's no confusion when you're trying to uphold them, and nobody sort of come back at you? I don't know if I make any sense, but
you make a lot of sense. Yeah,
I think that's where I'm at, because I cannot be like quitting job after job after job, right? Because what I do, I kind of cannot do that. So how do I do that from the get-go? Because 5 years ago I was very naive. Now I'm a bit better, but again, I'm nowhere. I don't really have strong anchors. So AMART is one place where I anchor. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say, and ask, really.
Thank you, sis. We appreciate you. I'll just say something very quickly, but I think Dr. Nakae will be amazing to take this on. And I see Dr. Idil has joined us. I'm so grateful, because she usually doesn't. So this is a big deal as we round up here. But I want to, first of all, thank you for being just you. You are just super amazing. And your vulnerability and authenticity at every moment we share space is a blessing to me. Sister Pascal, I want to say that I want to hold space for what you mentioned, the guilt and guilty feelings, the guilt around potential complicity, the abandonment, the tension as you make very difficult decisions that involve your career, and your livelihood. I want to make space for that. And so the what immediately came to mind before we hear the rest of the brilliance that will be shared is, and I think this is just a message I need to start bothering you with, like every day or every other day or something. I'll text you or so. Is I want you to be kind to yourself. I just want you to be kind to yourself and show grace to yourself, because you're fantastic and wonderful, and you do the best you do the best you can with what you know. And when you know better, you do better each and every time. In the short time I've known you, I've witnessed that, so I can only imagine. And so I just need you to be kind to yourself, sis, and that's coming from a fellow self-flagellator, who beats one, when we beat ourselves up because we don't meet some arbitrary standard of perfection, or some or expectation that God knows where it comes from. So I just want to celebrate you, and virtually give you a tight hug and plead with you to be kind to yourself, because you are enough. As you are. And so I want to turn it over to Dr. Nakae, and then Lana, if there's anything you want to add. And she had two questions around: how do you determine your value alignment? How do you ensure that your values are front and center, so there's no confusion, and problems when it is expressed? And then how do we take care, how do we take care of ourselves? Isn't that right? How do we make sure that we are taking care of ourselves in the middle of dealing with such difficult environments? Is that right, Sister Pascal?
Yeah, Dr. Barr, thank you. Yeah, this is right. You summarized it well. But can I ask one more question that goes on top of that?
Mm-hmm.
So when you are in those spaces, right, and you are the only one, and to bring about that transformation, in a way, you do rely on the white people that are around. I have this approach where I'm like, okay, I can work with them, but also remind them that I am not, because some of them I don't want to be a white apologist here, but some of them in a way want to see the change happening, right? And they're willing to put in the work, or at least it seems. So how do we actually gather them, right, to this cause to get to where we're going? Because, the Martin Luther King, they did work with some white people to make those things happen. Whether we like it or not, our liberation doesn't, I don't know, I feel like we have to find a way to rope those people who are genuine in there. So how do we do that, and how do you identify them, and all of that? Because again, I'm going in this all white space, so
I hear that. No, I hear your question. How do you bring the co-liberators along? How do you bring genuine allies or co-liberators along on the journey? I think these are fantastic questions for Dr. Nakae and Sister Lana. We talk about this all the time. Dr. Nakae, go ahead, and then we'll have Lana jump in, and then we'll jump to Sister Adil, and then I want to give people their Saturday back. Go ahead, Dr. Nakae.
Yeah, I really appreciate these questions. I think initially it's sort of how do we define our values? I think just aside from the institution has already defined its values. And that you're going into it's all white. So you can look at the evidence that exists already in the status quo of the institution and get a sense of what its values are. Take time to write your own and your personal creed. And then I would really have a moratorium on any commitments until you have an opportunity to really explore and see for yourself, because everybody's going to come forward and say, I'm an ally, or I want to work with you. But I think you need an opportunity to actually observe what people do, right? You need people to show you who they are rather than tell you who they are. So I think it's okay to have a moratorium on any commitments and just let people know, hey, I'm new to the institution. I'm taking about 3 months to just kind of learn about initiatives and things that are going on. And you're going to have to be prepared to say no to things. When you put up the institution's initiatives or the ask that's coming to you and your own values, you're going to have to be prepared to say, that's a no, right? I'm not going to choose to be on this committee because it sounds like this is really just kind of a token invitation. It's not an opportunity to do good work. So I think making sure that you're really clear initially, and then don't go in assimilating to other people's expectations, have your own. And when those opportunities present themselves and align with what you want to do, and then make a conscious choice to commit to those things. But as is true in many historically white colleges and universities, they're going to throw anything and everything at you, right? Because they're like, hey, it's minority tax time to collect and collect and collect. And then we really pillage people and just sort of run them out. So you're going to need to have a protective layer of caution until you're able to really see through what people do, what they fund, their actions, what is worthy of your time. I want to just answer the question that you were talking about earlier around community and how do we ground ourselves and redefining leadership. What Lana said, and that is that when I was a social worker working in a community partnership, we had some exchange students, international students in our program that were from Ghana. And we were really struggling to kind of get rooted in this community of refugees and this community partnership center that we had on the south side of Salt Lake. And one of my colleagues from Ghana said to me, do you know how we herd goats in Ghana? And I said, I don't. And he said, well, let me just say, in America, you guys get on like a high horse and you use things that hurt people and you whip them and you beat them into submission and you corral them and you pierce their ears, you do these terrible things to your animals. And he said, in Ghana, we just use is a simple stick and we do it from behind. And he said, this is a community where you have to learn to lead from behind. You get out front and you think, oh, I'm on this horse and I can do all these things by force, but that's often not how it works. And so I think the community is what roots us and humbles us. And if you are not in communities that humble you, you're already starting to get that root deterioration, right? And so I think we purposely have to seek out opportunities where we are humbled by the communities, by the relationships, by the village and spaces that we share. And finally, I think one of the safety mechanisms is really, my husband's a mechanical contractor, and so everybody knows they have those GFI outlets that have the button where if it gets triggered or gets set, it goes to ground is what it's called. So there's electrical current that's going in everything. And there's a safety where instead of being discharged out where it can cause harm, it actually goes to ground, right? And that's what it's called. And so we need those people in our lives that are going to help us go to ground when we need to, because sometimes our activism and our energy gets discharged and it can cause us harm, and it can cause the people around us harm if we're not careful and thoughtful about how we want to operate in these spaces. And so I would say to you, Dr. Pascal, that again, it's that self-compassion and the grace with self in allowing yourself to set the pace, right? You set the pace and you control the pace of the work, and don't put yourself in a position where you're constantly responding to other people's demands. Drive your own agenda in that space and be really conscientious and deliberate about what you make commitments to. And they're lucky to have you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's right there. They're lucky to have you. Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, Dr. Nakae, because that was one of my thoughts. Oh crap, she's going to a predominantly white space. They're going to put her on every committee because she's the Black, woman. And so what you said is absolute on there. If you and y'all community Roundtable, AMART, if you don't have a written personal mission statement or personal creed, I like that. I hadn't used it that way. I like that term, personal creed. I love that. I usually say mission statement and vision statement. Please have one and write it down. Write down your personal mission statement or personal creed and revisit it regularly. And ask yourself, when you look at your calendar and your schedule, all right, I'm going to give this free tip. The rest of it, you're going to have to hire a Power Speaks for this. But look at your schedule and your calendar. Does it reflect your personal creed or your mission statement? The committees you're part of, look at your CV, your what you're using your time for. Does it reflect your personal creed and your mission statement or no? And again, like Dr. Nakae said, you are worthy. You don't have to do shit but be Black, beautiful, glorious, pay taxes maybe, and die. So whatever you're joining and everything, it has to be in alignment with that mission, your why. for being in the world. Write it down so you can see it. You can read it. You can reevaluate it. I have mine written and I started putting it on slides as well. So folks know how I show up. It's essentially like my positionality statement. This is why I repeat my mission in every Saturday when we talk, and Amar's mission. This is our why. This is our North Star. And so I get opportunities to have different folks on here and to do different things. And if it's not aligned with the mission, then we're going to have other types of conversation. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. So I think that's an outstanding piece of advice. Thank you for saying it. And that's self-compassion. We're going to have a roundtable on that, because I have noted that is a big issue amongst those of us that do this work. And I put myself in there too. I talked about being a self-flagellate, just being so hard on ourselves. We set unrealistic standards. I mean, God bless us, but Lord God, we won't last too long. And I told y'all, we got to protect our telomeres. We need to be here. In my case, 150. I don't know what number you decided with your creator. I decided 150. Okay, so them telomeres need to be hella protected. So we cannot be out here beating ourselves up. Okay, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you are more than enough. Sister Lana, did you have anything you wanted to just quickly add before we go to Sister Adele, and so we can close?
No, I want to hand the mic off to the next person.
Okay, thank you, sis. Sister Adele, the one and only power lady. You are welcome. Thank you for being here. What is your offering?
Thank you so much, Dr. Gioma, and thank you everybody for your contributions. I think I just had a few thoughts and comments as I was listening, particularly on the issue of self. And then I'd like to come back to Dr. Pascal's lamentation around maintaining our sanity. And so I guess, first of all, I want to make really clear that when I speak about sanity, I'm not talking about the pathology of like DSM insanity, but rather I always offer to Black people for us to consider the maddening world in which we are already situated, right? And so once we put that within a particular context, I think that there's a way that we begin to understand that we've been maddened. We're put in very irrational places, spaces, and situations, right? And quite frankly, then asked to perform in particular kinds of ways. So I guess an invitation that I would give Dr. Pascal first and foremost is to say, really, when we look at the logics of the world, none of us should be okay. None of us, in fact, should be, quote, sane in certain kinds of ways, right? And so I think that's something for us to consider and to really think about the environment and the structure that causes us to quit jobs, right? That causes us to leave, and what that produces. So I guess that's one offering. And the other piece for me, to be honest, around how I take care of myself in institutions is I often show up as these people expect. Okay? And as they read me. Right? And so there's many a time, and I'm not suggesting for people to do this, but there's many a time I show up exactly as your racist reading of me, and I'm not apologetic about that. I will tell you about yourself. I will be unkind if I need to be at times. I will be whatever people want to call it. And I'm not going to apologize for that because I have the agency to make some of those decisions. Right? And that's a part of my own resistance. That's a part of my own functioning in some of these spaces and places. And that's also about risk, right? So when we are in these new spaces, we have to sort of determine, like, what is my level of risk? What am I willing to do? And as Dr. Pascal said, some people are in situations where that risk is not as, can't be as much as other people. But I think we really need to invite each other to think about, like, what is our capacity and bandwidth for risk? Right? And what does that look like? How do we decide what that may be for us today? And that may not be the case tomorrow. But I think that there has to be a level of risk taking. And sometimes that risk is that, yes, you say no to a committee, right? Other times that risk could be something much greater. Risk doesn't always have to be public. Risk doesn't always have to be hurtful or painful. Risk can also be quiet. It can be in, as other people said, seeing someone in a particular hallway, etc. And just on, I think one of the final points I wanted to just address that I know we spoke about earlier is this, white lash, right? And for me, I think it's much easier often to deal with the public kinds of white lash, as opposed to the everyday toxic white rage, white riot, that we're situated in, the muckiness, the nastiness of what that is, right? An article is fine. An article I can read, right? But what about the person that's spiritually disturbing and engaging in white violence that makes us sick, that makes us mad, that makes us want to refuse risk, that makes it difficult for us to function in our work? And so that's another piece as well, because I think we often don't talk about that. We often don't talk about the ways that we are captured and arrested by that kind of violent, nasty, white, capitalist, gendered, all these kinds of violences that are in that space. So I do also want to turn our attention to the kinds of interactions that may not be as overt as we would call them, right? And I think that's a critical piece. And just, I think about, as Lana and others have said, is we have to know what we're doing on the inside, because we cannot be saying that we're an inside outsider when you don't even know what the hell your job is on the inside. Right? So if you're still in fact trying to figure that out, I think we have to think about then what is our expectation of people when they don't even know what they're doing in there. Right? And so that's always something that I hold both as an educator and someone who works daily with folks. But yeah, so those are just some of the thoughts that I had and wanted to share. So thank you.
No, thank you. I think that was really well. That was a worthwhile offering. And yes, what the hell are you doing on the inside? What is your role in the first place before we can talk about how the outside comes into play in order to then coordinate for change? And that is a very important conversation. Again, like we said, we're just scratching the surface, and there's so much to unpack. And thank you for lifting up how the a naming. We use the article in terms of the white lash as one example. It's public. It was published and it's accessible all over the world. But truly, it's just symptomatic of the chronic and chronically simmering, ongoing white violence that is not as overt. And I thank you for just like being explicit with that. And my hope is that folks get that, that it shows up all kinds of ways in the quietness as well as in the loudness, and naming that is important. And then what is therefore our strategy for addressing that, for approaching that, for contending with that. And so thank you for reminding us. Sister Lana, is there anything that you'd like to respond? And then we're going to go ahead and close the space. Sister Lana? Sister Lana, are you there? Dr. Nakae. Oh, there you go.
I'm here, but I'm good to go. You guys can go ahead. I'm having a bit of humorous moment over here on something completely separate, so ignore me right now.
No worries. Dr. Nakae, do you have any response?
I just want to say in closing that I love this idea of redefining leadership as collective, because when we do that through our powerful connections with each other, this strategy sort of goes away, right? The polarities of this strategy goes away when we each stay connected to that deeper purpose of the collective of why we're doing this. And then we bring resources, we divert resources, we stand in those spaces as powerful co-liberators. And, we provide safe passages to our people who are being harmed. And we're able to go in and create change and change space by being in it. So I just want us to think about that power of the collective as we do this, and that these strategies aren't really that much different. We're both corely centered on advancing the health of our communities and on that co-liberation.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think absolutely really beginning to think about, and I love this, a beautiful place to end, which is even dissecting the very structure of this strategy, which is it is inherently in polarity, inside versus outside. Well, how about it's one side, right? How is it about same side? And if we can think about it from a collective and sort of disrupt that polarity, that dichotomy, maybe we can expand the potential for such a strategy to actually bring about the institutional core structural changes that we want. And so I appreciate that. And it also sort of expands the opportunities around resources and sharing that resources to leverage for that change. Dr. Nakai, it has been outstanding. You are absolutely right. This conversation is just so affirming. I have been starving for many hours because I had breakfast and then I had to run to Lansing for the talk and then run back and I haven't eaten. And can I tell you, I'm only now hearing my stomach growl. I this whole time, and that's saying a lot for me because as I think Sister Paula, she's not here today. She always notes, girl, you stay eating, and yes, 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 you got to maintain all this jelly. And so I just want to thank you for a wonderful conversation, Lana, as always, Sister Idil, thank you so much. Sister Pascal, precious, precious. Thank you, Dr. Kim. I appreciate you, Sister Kim. And all of y'all out there, I see you. Sister Adieu, my joke. Thank you for being here. Sister Nicole Rochester, I appreciate you. Wonderful, powerful sister. Follow Dr. Rochester and her work, GPS Doctor. She is fantastic. You don't even know. Sister Helena, I see you. Thank you. Just really faithful and wonderful. I see you, Eric Lowe. I see each and every single one of you. Thank you for being here. I thank you as well, Brother Graham, for being here. Everyone, we appreciate you. We've been talking about the inside outside strategy and exploring, how effective is it? What is it? And how effective is it in bringing out about institutional change as we do the work of anti-oppression and anti-racism in our respective settings? We've explored multiple layers to it. We've identified some of the challenges and shortcomings and what it means to be an insider and how do we navigate and contend and take care of ourselves and deal with the deadness of the coloniality that underpins these structures and systems that we find ourselves in, and how we then build differently, and do we need co-liberators, and how does that look like in that process? We've talked about the importance of taking care of ourselves and exercising self-compassion. We've talked about the role of white lash and white violence, essentially, that shows up in across the spectrum, from the most overt and painfully obvious to sort of the more covert and quiet, but not any less violent and harmful and hurtful. But we've talked about the fact that we push forward because when we choose to stand in our power and use our strength in service of our vision, it doesn't matter, or rather it matters less and less that we are afraid. And speaking of vision, we talked about the need for defining our values and defining our personal creed, our mission statement, of vision statement, writing it down, reminding ourselves of us and of it, and ensuring that it is in alignment with the ways that we spend our times and what we say yes and no to, as offered by the settings that we find ourselves in. And finally, we begin to do some freedom dreaming as around what it looks like to even disrupt the very idea of inside outside. What would a one side look like? What would a same side look like? And disrupt that polarity so that we can really lead as a collective and pull those resources that might actually be one of the avenues to addressing one of the challenges, shackles we talked about, in terms of how some insiders are compromising the ability to actually activate for change, which is financial demands and instability or insecurity. But what would it look like in a collective setting where resources are shared and folks don't feel that they have to stay in places or participate in settings or contexts that don't serve them? So much, so very much was uncovered and unpacked. I learned so much. I hope that you did as well. and that you took this was of value to you, and this speaks to and informs your work, your strategizing, your organizing as you participate in your inside outside or other strategy. What did you find most valuable about this conversation? What changed for you? What was new for you, or what new or modified perspective did you gain as a result of this conversation? Go ahead and tweet it out with the hashtag AMAT. Please tag me so that I can know, as well as retweet and amplify. We want to know that we are having an impact on our community, and other we ideas and topics you want to talk about, because what we want is to ensure that as a community we are learning and internalizing, and we're growing in the tools we need to do the work that we need to do in terms of liberation and building what that the community, as well as the systems that we know that we need and that we want. So I want to encourage you to do that. I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate the generosity of time you've offered the roundtable. And, as always, go forth and love yourselves. I love you. Love yourselves, love each other, build community, and build power. And we will close with some Afro beats, and then, end the room.
Mr. Flavor Party Dancer. Another one. Give it to them. Now you. Are you the original roots by Mr. Flavor Party Dancer? Baby Nayoka, I want to know what's up.